Good morning, good afternoon, whatever the time is where you're at. This is Conducting a Better Meeting. If you're here, this presentation is for how to prevent your meetings feeling like you'd rather be somewhere else. We've all been to those meetings where we look at the clock and we pray for the time that the meeting will be over. And we leave it and we don't really feel like anything was accomplished. We'll probably be coming back to have that meeting again. So no one likes to be in a poor meeting. None of us like to feel like we ran a meeting where nothing really got accomplished. And we certainly don't feel like we're wanting to hit the same issues over and over again. So this presentation is going to talk about some strategies to help you avoid that situation where you end up in the meeting that will never end. So I feel like it's very important to start with a little bit of humor.
Hey, I was on this date the other night, and we were at this restaurant.
All right, guys, you guys ready to get started?
Hang on a second.
Trip, you ready to get started, buddy?
Okay, hey, you guys, we're all here. We should start.
All right, thanks for coming, guys. I just wanted to take a few minutes and talk about some ideas for the marketing strategy this year. So if you got one, just throw it out there. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, how long is this meeting supposed to last? The schedule wasn't exactly clear.
Should be out of here in 30.
Is that approximate or?
Hey guys, sorry I'm a couple minutes late. I got caught in traffic.
7 minutes, actually.
What's that?
A couple is 2.
So what we're doing is we're just coming up with some ideas for our new marketing strategy.
Sure.
So, anyone?
I think we should implement Pinterest.
Ooh, that's a fun idea.
What about a publicity event in the park?
Interesting. But how are you going to plan around the weather? What if it rains?
So we'll party in the rain.
Okay, just want to emphasize there's no bad ideas here. We're just brainstorming. So.
Yeah, I'm just really thinking it'll be a huge waste of money to try to plan around the weather.
Yeah, okay, we get your concerns. Nancy, thank you.
Okay, anyone else have an idea? Ephraim?
I've always wanted to see rain fall down all at once in a big splash instead of small drops over time. I mean, think how it could impact the irrigation system.
Okay, Terry?
Well, I have an idea from my previous job that I had last year. Let me take that back a little bit. I have this wonderful idea, but it doesn't really make sense unless I just take it back a second and bring it forward together. It was like 3 weeks ago that I remember he said something that I couldn't understand.
Hold on a second, Terry. Hold on. Thanks for pointing. Here's what we need to do. Okay, Lauren, you got this? We do a video submission contest on YouTube.
Oh,
okay?
That's been done.
It'll be on Facebook, it'll be on Pinterest, it'll be on
If
Twitter.
we do something with technology, we lose the senior demographic.
So you guys want to see an example?
Should we be moving on to the next topic? I mean, it's already 1:15.
It's quarter after. That's funny.
Who knows how to put this on the screen? Up there, because you're not going to be able to, I want you to see all the details. We have a cable. Does this cable work?
I think that's power.
I don't know if on the there's an
This one.
HDMI
That
port,
cord's not going to be long
in
enough.
the back.
Does that
there
remote
could be
go to
like
the
2 or 3,
TV?
like HDMI 1.
Plenty of time,
HDMI
guys.
2,
No rush.
HDMI
This isn't
3,
working.
I got a
and
green
they
marker.
coincide
Call the
with
IT
each
guy.
other with,
Wait,
there's
turn
also,
what off and back
what
on?
do you call it? S-video.
Hello?
Okay, I've got it working.
Hit play.
Okay, now imagine hundreds of those floating around the web. Do you want to watch it one more time?
No, please.
Trip, I think you're onto something with this idea. I really like it. Carol, did you get that down?
Yeah.
Sorry, what is C-test up sub YT pros?
Well, I'm abbreviating to make room for all these great ideas. Contest, uploading it to YouTube, funniest, and you get a prize.
Wait, where are the other ideas?
And time.
Wait, where y'all going? We still have 100% of the things to accomplish.
Hopefully when you're listening to that video, you can relate to a few of the items and a few of the people you see in there. And, you know, we've all had those meetings where we feel like the different characters involved perhaps don't make the meeting run super effective. But what can we do about that? Again, we're trying to avoid this situation like in this cartoon strip here. This month's business meeting is the same as last month's business meeting, but with many more problems. Now, I remember in one of my first positions, a teacher coming up to me to talk about our MTS RTI system. And, I was brand new there, and the teacher said, can we stop having these meetings, do away with it? And I remember being like, why would you do that? Why would we get rid of our student intervention system? And what I got told was, well, we meet every other week and we fill in some notes and we put them into a notebook that goes into the vault, and then nothing ever happens with it. And I remember saying, how about instead we fix our meetings so something useful comes out of it? But you might be running into situations like that where people might think, let's just not do it rather than have these meetings to talk about it, because we just waste a lot of time. So how do we avoid that? One of the things you can do is gathering information ahead of time. Try to get people to provide their input. Try to get that input and help you structure your meeting, and thinking about how you want to involve people in decision making can all do a lot to make a meeting more effective. Running the meeting more effective itself, and keeping to time limits, putting out those agendas, having clear expectations. That one kind of blends into there, but like clearly defining where you're going to go after the meeting, how you're going to follow up, making sure something happens because you had a meeting. Those are all very important things. And these aren't some crazy concoction of my mind, but some stuff that comes from best practice and things that will certainly help you make the meeting accomplish something. Perhaps you won't get a prize for the most entertaining meeting, but that's okay. Sometimes the best rewards are the results we can achieve. So preparing for a meeting. One common criticism that you hear that is fairly valid is, we sat around, we talked about all this stuff, and it could have just went in an email. I could have read about when the harvest games was going to happen. I could have read that the janitor wants us to quit putting objects on top of the unit event. We really didn't need to have a meeting for this. And part of making people feel like their time is valuable, and that when they're meeting, it's something constructive is going to happen, is avoiding just talking about things that were already in the email, talking about things that don't really require discussion. You're just telling them things. Certainly there's topics where you need to provide some time for discussion and questions so that you understand what people are wondering. But it is important to identify those pieces of information that really need to come to a meeting at all. I like to have items within my agenda that are just for information items or calendar items, and we don't spend time going through that. I do allow people to ask me questions if there's something on that, but the expectation is you're going to read it. Later, I'm going to get into this, but if you take time putting stuff together, don't be afraid to refer people back to the email, refer to the agenda. Because if people are coming to the meeting and they're asking you to rehash everything that you already spent time delivering information on, nobody's going to read the information. They're just going to come to a meeting and ask you, and pretty soon, even though you did all that work, you'll be back to square one, and we don't want that. Now, putting out information ahead of time also gives you the opportunity to collect information ahead of time. Sometimes having that information allows you to run the meeting more effectively. For example, one of the strategies I'm going to talk about is surveys. I remember a meeting where we were going to talk about some aspects of the ARR program, and our AR coordinator wanted to do some specific things with it. And they wanted to make sure we're following best practices, and we wanted to move away from something. I don't remember what it was in particular, but the staff member had gotten stuff together, prepared it, and they're ready to have a long, lengthy discussion. I had sent out a survey, and it turned out pretty much everybody agreed with the direction she wanted to go on. So she was here with this pile of information, saw the survey, said, we're going to go this direction. And it's unfortunate that she took the time to put that stuff together and collect her thoughts, but we avoided a potentially long discussion that really didn't need to happen because there was already a good amount of agreement on it. And avoiding those pitfalls can really help you get a lot more out of your meeting and it to be more effective. So sending out that information to allow people to process it, prepare themselves to the meeting, and collecting information to make yourself prepared so that you can come with the necessary information and you know what you're trying to accomplish and that you don't get thrown surprises. So part of this is identifying what sort of decisions you're trying to make in a meeting. Chances are you're having a meeting because you need to discuss some things and you need to make some decisions on stuff. So it's important to know what exactly you need from people. And it's important not to give people the wrong impression of what you're trying to do, because by being well-meaning, you might ask for input in a certain way that actually makes people feel demeaned because that input isn't valuable in the way they think. For example, if you send out a survey and people think that you're asking for a vote, the vote is where you provide people various choices and each person picks what they think is the choice they should go with, and the expectation is that you'll go with the one with the most votes. Well, if you send out a survey to collect information, they think they're voting, but it's really a consult. And a consult is where you're gathering people's input. You are ultimately the one in charge of the decision, or perhaps you put somebody else in charge of collecting information and making a decision based on the information they collect. If you're really consulting with them, you're not asking for a vote. If there's a miscommunication in what's going on, it can actually cause the decision to backfire, could cause some dissension because people think it's supposed to happen one way or the other. The other two strategies, command. Command is like some of the stuff we deal with is top-down things. The state says we're going to do this. The state mandated masks as a recent example. Well, you wouldn't come to your staff meeting and say, well, how do we feel about the governor's mask mandate? Do we really want to do it? Perhaps these are conversations you need to have, but as far as when you come to the meeting and you're trying to make a decision, asking people to give you that kind of input in a consult or vote fashion is probably going to feel condescending because they don't really have that choice. They don't really get to decide if they get to follow the mandate or not. They just have to. So make sure you identify which of these things you're doing. Last is consensus. This is something that you would reserve for a very important decision, or maybe one with not a lot of controversy where you make sure everybody agrees. It's different from a vote because in a vote you might have some people that agree with the decision, some that don't. Consensus, you're trying to get everybody to agree on one course of action. Can be extremely valuable for building that buy-in and making people feel like their voice is heard and like they have a stake in things. But it can also be very cumbersome, and if there's a lot of division and conflict, it might not be something that you can really get a consensus on. And if it's something where you ultimately have to make the choice and it's more of a consult, like I said, you need to fit what you're asking people for, their information, with the decision-making model. So if you look through your agenda and you're going to discuss and make decisions on things, make sure you understand which path you're taking so that you don't give people the wrong impression, and communicate it clearly. So if you send out a survey because you're consulting with your staff and you want to get their input and see what thoughts and feelings are, but ultimately you're going to make that decision. For example, every year I send out a survey on the calendar, and I always put in a disclaimer there, at the end of the day, I need X amount of days, I need to factor in holidays and things. I appreciate your input and it's taken into consideration. However, this isn't a vote. You're not voting on the calendar that you like best, and ultimately the board's going to approve the final thing or whatever. Just be clear, and that can avoid using a strategy that's really getting people involved, but making them feel like it's insincere. So reasons to put out information ahead of time and collect it. One is avoid wasting time talking about issues that there's an agreement on. Like in my example, sometimes there's actually an agreement on things, and sometimes we're not very good judges of that. Sometimes we all pretty much agree that, we want to go on this field trip. Like, you're asking, do we all want to go to the pumpkin patch this year? And you just ask people, and, they pretty much agree on that. You can come to the meeting, say, I sent out the survey, this was the thoughts on that, this is what we're going to do, and proceed on rather than have a 5 or 10 minute discussion, as can certainly happen. It can also allow you, as the person running the meeting, to know the right questions to ask. You can say, from the survey, these are the sorts of things that are important to people. Let's discuss this further. It allows you to pinpoint what's important to people and sometimes get you on the right track. Sometimes we think we know what people are thinking, but when we send out the information, we find out that we're a little off base, that it was a little different than we thought. And sometimes collecting this information and sending this information out ahead of time gives us a better picture of what's going on. The other thing is that some people need time to process things. So if you give them information ahead of time, you make it clear what they're going to have to come prepared for, you're more likely to engage in the conversation. There's just some people that, you know, if you just show up at a meeting and say, we're going to discuss something, and they don't get a lot of time to think about it, they're just not really going to talk. They might have a really valuable decision. They're probably going to track you down later and share it. And it'll be outside that staff meeting, and maybe it was something that would have been much more useful in the staff meeting. So those are some reasons to be sharing and sending out information. And sometimes you don't know something is contentious, and maybe you think like consensus is a good strategy for it, but when you send out the information, you find out that no, we better dig more into this. Maybe we need more information. Perhaps it might shed more light on what the proper decision-making protocol should be. So some different tools to do this is surveys. Again, caution with surveys. Make sure people understand what it's for. If you're trying to get if you're trying to get a vote, if you're trying to consult, if you're trying to see if there's consensus, I wouldn't use the survey to determine to be the deciding factor in consensus. You want to be fairly sure in that situation. Some different tools that you can use. Google Docs, you can have a shared document that people can go on and put information on. Same with Office 365's edit documents that you can edit can be very useful. These allow staff, if they want to provide input ahead of time or some thoughts on some items, and they can put it right in there. For example, you have Red Ribbon Week coming up, and it's easier just for the counselor to go in there and type in the different things that they're going to do, or you got a plan for a fire prevention week. So it allows you to avoid that information that's just reportable, but perhaps you're not the keeper of that knowledge, and it gives a person means to share that information ahead of time. Or if you're having an MTSS meeting or student intervention meeting, staff can put down some different concerns. So you have time to process those issues people are seeing, and it's not the first time you're hearing it at the meeting. Emails and agendas. Again, agendas are very useful. They allow people to know what the topics are. They allow people to prepare for the topics. Emails are very good for sharing that information ahead of time, and it can be used to gather some information back and forth. It's not the greatest tool to replace number 4, conversations, because sometimes, you know, particularly if you're looking to see if maybe you have consensus or you're just consulting with things, sometimes having that one-on-one conversation with somebody, or even enlisting other members of your staff to have those conversations, can be great ways to gather information, to get like a feeling or a temperature on a particular topic. Ignore my alarm there. But they can be very useful tools so that you head into your meeting knowing what to expect, knowing what information the people need, knowing what information you need to provide. And it can help you identify where your time needs to be spent and where it doesn't need to be spent. Because like I said, if we had rolled into that meeting about AR and we started discussing the issue on the agenda without the survey, we could have been there a long time and it turned out to be completely unnecessary. Or I could have skipped over a topic like what are the recess rules, and finding out that nobody really knows what they are. I thought they did, and you know, being able to say here's what they are, be able to get through that information very fast rather than having a lengthy discussion because I didn't realize people were unsure about it. So it's really just ways to be prepared. So again, a little bit of humor.
Allow me to play devil's advocate here, but allow me to be a dick for a second, but with no consequences.
Let's pull back on that for a second. I fell asleep while you were talking and I have no idea what's happening. Huh?
I've got a stupid question. It's actually like a really smart question, but I was wondering if I say stupid beforehand, does that make me like kind of modest? Is that like sort of charming thing to do, right?
Let's pick that up in the next meeting. I need a few days to figure out what the hell you're talking about.
But will this scale? One of the managing directors once used that phrase in a meeting, so now I use it all the time.
Sorry, this is just a work email I have to answer. I'm actually playing words with friends with everyone else in this meeting but you. Do you know a 4-letter word for long-winded?
If there's an outside chance, you might be right. You're wrong. You're definitely wrong.
I think what you're trying to say So what I'm gonna do is take that idea and then make it sound like it was mine.
Let's try to make this viral, okay? I just heard about this site called reddit.com. Can we get on there?
I think we should make this a cross-platform opportunity. I watch Shark Tank.
Let's take this offline. Yeah, can we pick this up again? Just maybe 15 minutes after never again.
Well, that's one idea. It's actually the one idea that sucks the most, so thank you.
This might be off topic. This is off topic, and it's gonna be a while.
All right, great meeting. So just please send me all your ideas before EOD. This meeting could have just been an email, but I'm very lonely.
So the purpose of sharing that little skit was just to point out the fact that people don't always say what they mean. And this is an experience I've had, and I used to struggle with it as an administrator. I'd leave a staff meeting thinking I understood what people want, and then found out that, I was way off topic, and there's some reasons for that. Now, one meeting I remember in particular was after several weeks of 20 below weather, and we'd had indoor recess over and over again. And just to provide some context, people were getting tired of having kids indoors. And we had a staff meeting. We were going to talk about, at what time we send kids outside when it's cold. And one of the people there got on a soapbox and talked about how, we need to be North Dakota tough. We need to be sending kids outside. We'll send them outside no matter what temperature it is. If they get too cold, we'll bring them in then. And I remember sitting there kind of looking around the room, being like, do people agree with this? And nobody really said anything. And if you remember that Dominator from the original video clip there with a little bit of humor, that was what was going on. This person was dominating the floor. No one was really saying anything. And one of the dangers if you have a situation like that is it is actually relatively natural for people who speak up at a meeting. If nobody questions them, if nobody puts in their 2 cents or adds to the conversation, there's a tendency to assume that people agree with you. So that person left the meeting thinking everybody agreed with them. I left the meeting and I was run down by several people that were saying things like, we're not going to do that, are we? I have a kid in kindergarten. I don't want him going out when that's that cold. I remember looking at them and they're like, why didn't you say that at the meeting? I thought it was crazy too, but I was looking around and nobody seemed to agree with that. And, some people aren't comfortable sharing information in front of everybody. Sometimes people feel stifled. They don't want to be judged by other staff members, so they'd rather just keep their opinions to themselves. And, that kind of goes back to gathering some of that information beforehand. Sometimes that helps you get an accurate picture of what people are really thinking and avoid that dominator situation. But some other things to consider. People will not always speak up. Some people are comfortable sharing it in a meeting. Maybe they're introverted, maybe they're shy. Maybe your staff culture isn't quite where you want it to be and they don't want to be judged by anybody. So they're afraid of what somebody else's opinion is. They know that person disagrees with them and they know that person's going to argue with them. So they would rather just be quiet and not say anything. Sometimes when you do those surveys, the individual conversations, that allows you to get around that willingness to share information and allows you to get a better idea. Now, another thing this can help avoid is the complaint that you might hear, and I'm sure you've never heard it. Well, he never asked my opinion. And sometimes this is a way to kind of grumble or whine about something. And, if you're at a staff meeting, that person might not want to speak up for whatever reason, and you make a decision and you think the person's in on it, and you get this complaint that you're not factoring in everybody's opinion. Well, if you're taking that effort to collect things in multiple ways, it may not completely prevent somebody saying that, this is just Mr. Ludvigson's decision. He didn't really consult me in making that decision. But it allows you to say, well, you were provided this and this and this opportunity to give input. Sorry if you don't feel like your thoughts were recognized, but if you wanted them recognized, you were provided means which to share. So it can help kind of alleviate that and give people avenues for providing information. I'm a firm believer that if somebody has a gripe, they will find a way to express it. So if you have a formalized process in which to get that information so it can get out in the open and addressed, you can prevent issues from festering and growing into bigger ones. And as I said, you know, often at the staff meeting context, the people that talk the most are going to be the ones that seem like they have the opinion of the group, and they're also going to view it as their opinion is the one everybody supports. However, just because a person did the most talking doesn't mean that's what everybody agreed with. If we collect information in multiple ways, we have a better, well-rounded picture of what's really going on. We avoid those situations where somebody just overshadows everybody and takes charge of that conversation. And when there really isn't that consensus there's not really that agreement, people just don't want to say anything. And I want to caution you as an experienced administrator that, you know, often when people are afraid of what their colleagues might say, they're probably not going to tell you that they're afraid of what their colleagues are going to say. They're probably not going to tell you, well, I know Mr. So-and-so has a strong opinion, so I didn't want to share it in front of you. You might even hear, you know, they're not really comfortable sharing it to administration. Like, just so you know, people aren't always straightforward with why they're not comfortable sharing information. So sometimes providing those multiple avenues will help, you know, give it a place to come out and hear it. And just caution with that. But sometimes it's not as easy as asking somebody like what would make them feel comfortable talking. So recap. What information can be given out ahead of time to make better use of the actual meeting time? Like I said, we collected information on a decision for AR and we avoided a lengthy discussion on it. And you had an experience like that. Have you experienced how not identifying how to make a decision can create unnecessary conflict or wasted time? Now with my story, there was a time where I sent out a survey about a calendar and people thought they were voting on the calendar, and it made them very upset when that calendar that got the most votes in their opinion and they thought everybody was going along with it didn't make it. I don't remember the exact decisions that went into it, but there was a reason that you know, I had to tweak it from what everybody wanted. So be careful to identify the reasons for those decisions you're making. How could getting information ahead of time help avoid the meeting getting off course? So, like I said, gathering that information ahead of time, for example, in that meeting about how people felt about putting people out in cold weather, could have provided me the opportunity to say, well, you know, I took a survey and it doesn't really seem like people want to be sending kids out. Like if I had that information, I might have been able to use it to redirect the conversation. So what are your experiences? How is the information presented here speaking to you? And how can you make use of it in your context? Take a few minutes to consider that. I don't know for sure in this conference if there's going to be a chat or not, but take a minute and we'll move on to the next slide here shortly. Hello, back again. So we're going to get into making meetings count. And some of my major topics blend together a little bit in here, but there is a method to the madness. As I said before, these aren't things I came with on my own. They come from some best practices. If you take a look at the picture, they're meant to avoid this, like, oh, the meeting that will never end. So we're talking about some strategies. Having a set agenda, managing your time, allowing floor time for others, and then we're kind of start talking about clear expectations, and that will segue a little bit into the next section. So having a set agenda, as I talked about in gathering information and sending out information, it serves more than just the purpose of giving information to people to prepare for it. It also serves as a tool for keeping you on topic. So none of us like when you go to the meeting and somebody brings up something that was completely unexpected. There was a playground issue, and what are you going to do about it? And you're like, what playground issue? This is the first time hearing about it. And this can waste a lot of time because, A, you're not prepared for it. You don't know much about it. So you're going to have to sort out all the details, and you might need information that's not available there. And, you know, a lot of people, it's going to make the meeting feel uncomfortable, and it's just not going to be a good thing. And it's a pretty common strategy for people to try to use to derail a meeting, is to throw a new piece of information out there that wasn't on the agenda. So by having a set agenda and insisting that people need to put it on the agenda, you know, barring emergencies or truly unexpected things, you can avoid being thrown off topic, which also avoids surprises. And none of us like being surprises, administrators and teachers alike. Teachers don't want to be talking about some topic that they're not prepared for any more than you are. Allows everybody to be prepared for the meeting. As I said in the previous section, some people need more time to digest, process. Allows them to gather information if they need it ready available, like if they need to bring some data to your MTSS meeting on a specific student, their observation, test scores. They know that, and they're not trying to dig it out of their bag or load it up on their computer, and you're not sitting around waiting for that to happen. So very important. And it makes it easy to spot if you do not have enough time to cover what's on your agenda. Something that I occasionally like to do, not for every meeting, but occasionally I'll have a running time on there. I'll say, about 5 minutes for this, 4 minutes for that. And the purpose of that isn't to say that we have to be done after 3 minutes on this topic or 5 minutes on that topic, but is to give me an idea about how long this meeting should reasonably take. And that can be very important because it can, it keeps me to a timetable so that I'm not rambling. So I'm not letting somebody else go on a tangent and waste a lot of time. I'm like, no, we don't have time for that. Let's refocus our energies here. Or that I need to wrap this up and move it along. Or it can allow you to let you know that this is going to take more than one meeting. And I'll kind of get into the importance of that, but respecting people's time is very important and is a major portion to having people think that things are going to be constructive, useful use of their time, and that they can expect that their time is appreciated. So managing your time is very valuable for this reason. Nobody wants to have an unpredictably long staff meeting. If you say it's going to be over by 4:30 and you're there till 5:30, something's gone wrong. Sometimes it's unavoidable, sometimes things are sudden and you need to make decisions, but if that is happening on a regular basis, something needs to change. Now, having a set agenda is one of the things that can help prevent that. You're avoiding going off topic. You're having stuff you're prepared for, and that's where the time limits. Now, this here, I'm talking more like your meeting's going to end at 4:30, and a lot of times I'll have somebody assigned to timekeeper, and they'll be like, "Hey, we're spending a little too much time on this. The agenda said we'd be done 5 minutes ago." Kind of giving that time Nazi an appropriate job there, but it is important to have somebody keeping track of that time. As I said, it forces you to stay on task. One of the things I found out as an administrator when I had these set agendas and trying to put the time frames in my head that I wanted things to happen in, I was less prone to providing unnecessary information, reiterating things too many times, and more apt to make sure I shared stuff ahead of time and I focused on the important things that needed to be shared at the meeting and not filling in a lot of time with unnecessary information. And this also avoids kind of a lot of the negative feelings towards a staff meeting. Like if you're consistently running over time, some people are going to make arrangements for babysitters, or they have something they're going to do after the meeting, maybe they have appointments. And if they can't count on you to end the meeting when they say it's going to end, there's going to be a lot of distrust there, a lot of grumbling, and they're going to make it feel like their time isn't really valued because you don't seem to put a premium on it. And as I said, I'm of the opinion sometimes it's better to adjourn the meeting and to reschedule to finish the agenda. Like if you get to the end of it and you see that you have 23 minutes left and it's already 4:40 and you said you got done at 4:30, sometimes it's better just to table it, say that we'll schedule another meeting, allow people to get on with their day. It is important to try to keep to those timetables. This really helps with positive feelings towards coming to the meeting and making it feel reliable. Now, something that's more important with committee meetings or leadership meetings or things like that is to take some time to talk about frequencies. How often do you want to meet? Now, this isn't to say that you absolutely have to meet every month, because that's the frequency we establish. Regardless of if we have anything to talk about, we'll meet. But if you have that general expectation that you're going to meet every month, or at least every other month, or whatever it is, then when meetings should be scheduled. You don't go long periods of time without scheduling a follow-up meeting, a regular meeting, that sort of stuff. People who have signed up for it have some sort of expectation about how much time that they're investing. And it helps to talk about what times works for that particular group to meet. If a particular group of people where morning works better, after school work better for whatever reason, having kind of a set time that's going to happen. Like, our staff meetings are going to be every second Wednesday of the month typically, or things like that. Having those anticipated frequency allows people to plan around it. I strongly recommend avoiding where you have, we're going to have a meeting tomorrow. Here's your notice. It's 4 o'clock. Hope you have a plan for a babysitter because the meeting at 7:30 tomorrow morning. You don't want to do that. It makes people think you don't value their time. And, if you give people time to plan for things, prepare for things, it's always good. So having set frequencies doesn't mean you have to stick to it like a stone tablet, but it can really help those positive vibes. Allowing floor time. If you're a seasoned administrator, I'm sure you've had the feeling of like, I feel like I do all the talking. If you've been to meetings, you might feel like so-and-so does all the talking. And this is really something that can lead to a lot of disengagement. Like if you're on the listening end, it's pretty easy to sit in the corner and just like, I'm biding my time here until the clock runs out so I can leave. It leads to the jokes of, when I come to a staff meeting, a little piece of my soul dies every time, those sorts of things that you frequently see. And this can be avoided a little bit with these strategies where, if you ask yourself as you're putting together that agenda, asking yourself, how do these decisions need to be made? Does the topic need to be handled by you? And the answer might be no. Like if you're doing a red ribbon week and the counselor's in charge of putting that together, let the counselor talk about that. If somebody had an issue they want to bring up about something that happened on the playground and playground rules, give that ball to the person that had the issue that they want to bring up rather than trying to pick it up and carry it yourself. Because if they spend all their time talking to you, it's kind of the same thing in the classroom. If you have a slideshow and people just sit and listen to you talk about the slideshow, it's easy to disengage. It's easy to just kind of sit through it and not really be a participant. This also allows people to be disengaged from the decision making, not really be that attentive to detail. And it really lends itself to that this is your meeting, it's not our meeting. This is something that you're requiring me to do and sit through. So sharing that floor time is a good way to get people engaged. If they know there's time to talk, you have to pay attention to, just like, when people do popcorn reading, that, they have to be aware of when it's their turn and that sort of thing. And, I think it fosters better collaboration. It also takes a little off your shoulders. Like you don't have to feel like you are the showman on stage trying to keep everybody entertained, dancing, doing backflips, and feeling frustrated as you look out there and you see the dull expression of people trying to not fall asleep. So that's a good way to avoid having to do all the talking, and it's a good way to try to get people to engage in the process and feel like more a part of it. And if they're feeling like a part of it, they're less likely to feel like their time's being wasted and that's valuable, and they actually have something to contribute. That's a very important part of it. If you feel like you're just at the meeting because your name on a sheet that says you're required to attend, but you don't actually have anything to contribute, it goes a long ways to feeling like, why am I here? So one way to do that is to, provide roles like secretary, timekeeper, enforcer. Enforcer is somebody that, tells people if we're getting outside the ground rules. Giving people in charge of the topics. Those are some ways to do it. And, doing things like rotating who's the secretary or different things. And depending on if it's a staff meeting or committee meeting, there's different roles you can assign people. But be careful not to do everything yourself, because nobody really wants to come and just listen to your take on everything, no more than you want to be personally shouldering the weight of the district on your shoulders. So recapping, what experiences have you had when you haven't had a set agenda? As a superintendent, I've certainly been to a board meeting where somebody said, what is our plan for the 100th anniversary for this all team going to state? And be like, news to me. Not that that was a bad experience, but like, you know, if this person had put it on the agenda prior, we could have had some information there. We would have gotten through it a little bit faster. So that's something that wastes a little bit of time. How do you feel when you don't stick to the communicated time frame? I know that's something I struggle with because, you know, I gotta get to the next event, gotta get to my kid's ball game, got to get home for dinner, whatever it is. I think it's very important to stick to your timelines. Do you ever get tired of hearing the same person talk at a meeting? Do you get tired of being that person? Please ignore the lack of an ing there, but yes, I have been in that situation where I feel like I need to do backflips, and it's not a positive feeling. It's not really a positive feeling to feel like you're just there to occupy space. So what are your experiences? Share if appropriate, and we'll move on to the next slide here shortly. So we're moving on to our last segment and starting with a little bit of humor. A little Dilbert cartoon here. How are you doing on your unspoken objectives? My what? I'm referring to the goals I have in my mind that I have never mentioned. How are those going? I'm totally nailing them. So I think if we're honest with ourselves, there's times that we've felt this way, and there's times that we've probably made other people feel this way, that, you know, we're expecting a little mind reading, or other people are expecting it from us. So an important way to avoid this, which also tends to make your meetings feel more productive, is having a clear purpose or direction. If you have a committee meeting, is there a specific thing you're trying to accomplish? You know, in combination with a set agenda and roles can be very important for making people feel like it's. So if you keep your eye on why you're there and what you're trying to accomplish, and you communicate that, that can go a long ways to establishing clear expectations. Now, number two is one that I know that people often roll their eyes at because they're like, you know, we're all adults working here. We should know how to work together. But, you know, the simple fact of the matter is that sometimes we don't. And I believe strongly that if you establish ground rules at the beginning of like when you start coming together as a committee meeting, even faculty meetings and things like that, taking time to talk about, like, we're going to talk about problems, not people. Everybody has a chance to share. Don't interrupt those things. Like, as small as they may be, they can go a long ways to making the meeting run more effective in the long run, particularly committee meetings, leadership meetings, things like that. One of the reasons they're pretty effective is that if somebody's violating the ground rules, if you've never talked about them, it kind of ends up being like this cartoon strip. Like, are you supposed to read my mind? So you need to have a conversation with somebody because, you know, they're always complaining about students, and one of your ground rules is we focus on solutions and we don't just complain. Well, if you never establish that as an expectation, it's hard to correct it, and it can be a lot more controversial because the person can be like, well, how was I supposed to know that? Or you're just picking on me. But if that was talked about ahead of time before there was a problem, correcting that can be a lot easier. And assigning roles, kind of like what I talked about on the soapbox thing, giving people a job can make them feel like they have something specific to contribute, that they know how to contribute, and can go a long ways to knowing what is expected, and just kind of providing that purpose to them individually in the meeting so that they know what they should be doing. So a little bit of humor here.
Yeah, you'd be safer with a sword in a plastic bag. All right, look, let me get back to you. I need to rearrange some meetings. Yeah, no problem. All right, see ya. Natalie?
Morning, Mr. Cobb.
Look, I'm going to need to rearrange some meetings for today, free up some time midday.
Got meetings midday.
I've got meetings all day.
Yeah.
Maybe we can move this 1 o'clock to 5
Got
p.m.
a meeting at 5.
But I'm going to need some time for lunch at some point.
What sort of lunch?
What?
What sort of lunch do you like? I'll set up a meeting to discuss lunch options.
I don't want a meeting. I want to eat at 1 o'clock.
You've got a meeting at 1 o'clock.
I know I've got... What is this 1 o'clock?
Boardroom availability.
What's that?
It's a meeting to discuss the availability of the boardrooms.
Availability for...
Meetings.
Right, so this is a meeting to discuss having a meeting.
No, that's at 4 p.m.
So who's this conference call with at 2 p.m.?
That's the conference call company. They'd like to have a meeting to discuss the effectiveness of conference calls.
And who's...
Everyone's in that one.
Maybe you should organise some time for me to go to the bathroom.
Done that. That's a 5-minute floating meeting every hour for personal evacuations. You just tell me what time you need to...
I'm not going to put my toilet visits in a diary, Natalie. This needs to be organised, not oppressive. Right, let's strip some of this out. Let's get rid of that boardroom meeting thing, the conference call, and definitely the visits to the toilet. That'll give me some time. Who are you calling?
Heads of departments. Emergency meeting to discuss the rearrangement of your meeting schedule. I'll book out the afternoon. Do you need a personal evacuation meeting?
I just need help.
So I think we can all agree that we don't want to start having meetings to discuss meetings. And I think one of the biggest things that causes things like that to happen is not having a clear course of action, following your meeting purpose. Or as this cartoon puts it, I'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting with you because I know you won't decide anything in the meeting we're about to waste an hour of my life on. One strategy I have found to help avoid this situation is to end your meeting with an action list or to have it embedded in there. But spend some time talking about who is going to do what, when is it going to get done, and establishing when you're going to check on progress. By doing that, you clearly define what the action from whatever discussion you might be having is going to be. A common problem is that you might have a lengthy discussion. It might be a really great discussion. You share all kinds of great ideas, but then you dismiss the meeting and people leave and they're actually out there wondering, well, who was supposed to do what? What action are we supposed to actually take? So if you remember my reference earlier to the staff member coming up to me and asking if we could stop having RTI meetings, that's exactly what was going on there. They were talking, and it wasn't necessarily that the discussion was bad, but nothing was ever actually determined as far as what are you going to do with that information? What are you going to do with that discussion? And so that kind of can end up feeling like the meeting that never ends, where there's all talk and no action, whereas this little thing goes, less talk, more action. And if you're able to come back to meetings and tell people that these action list items were taken care of and that that something happened, that goes a long way to making feel like it was a productive use of time. It also is an effective way to see if you're assigning all those tasks to yourself or a particular individual, because then you can see it laid out there and you can see, oh, Mr. Ludvigson, Mr. Ludvigson, Mr. Ludvigson. Well, maybe somebody else should have a task. And by kind of divvying that up, it's more of everybody pitching in. So I think having an action list is pretty effective. At minimum, spend some time talking about how things are being executed from the discussion and all the things that you're spending your time discussing. Now, with action items, it's also very important to have follow-through. Follow-through is just kind of making sure those things that you're assigned, that you set actions to, actually happen. Because, as an example, we've had lots of MTSS meetings, student intervention meetings, and one of the problems I've often noticed is that we have a really great intervention, but maybe somebody doesn't necessarily follow through on it. They tried it once and then they dropped it. So by following through, you can be like, so how's the student intervention plan going with the check-in in the morning? Well, not great. It's not really that effective. Well, how often have you done it? Well, I did it once that one morning and it didn't show up. So I've been busy, yada, yada. Well, you didn't carry through on the plan. You really can't say if it worked or it didn't work. And if you're coming back to meetings and people are saying things like that and it becomes a pattern, you're going to start seeing things as a waste of time because naturally that is what's happening, that you're talking, making a plan, but nobody's actually carrying through on the plan. It's just going to feel like that meeting that never ends syndrome. Now, sometimes it's pretty important to talk about how you're going to follow up. If you're having a student intervention meeting, you might say that, in 2 weeks, we're just going to check in, see how things are going, see if we're doing these things. If, you're having somebody get together community contacts and make a list, you like bring it back to the next meeting. It just kind of depends on the task. Sometimes simply establishing the expectation that it's going to be done by the time you meet again can be effective for committees. Sometimes with staff meetings, you're going to need something a little more concrete. It just kind of depends on what sort of expectations and routines that you have there. But make sure it is known when something is supposed to get done. And if it's some bigger task, you might need different milestones. And I highly recommend being specific with timelines. I'll admit I'm some person that if you say, like sometime in the next month, would you? Chances are I probably won't get that task done. If you say, by next Monday, I would like, I'm very good at getting that done. And, a lot of people are that way. So if you're specific on when things are supposed to occur and don't use vague terminology, chances are things are going to get done. Now, I referenced this earlier, but like when you put everything in your staff agendas or in an email or different things, don't be afraid to refer people back to them. Like, what did we discuss doing? Please refer to the action items from our meeting minutes, or please refer to the notes sent out, or if it was within the agenda, point that out. If you have a Teams group where you upload the minutes or things like that, don't be afraid to reference the resources provided, because somebody, perhaps it's you, is spending time putting that together, and it's going to feel like wasted time if nobody's using it. And particularly if it's a strategy to help prevent wasted time at meetings. If it's supposed to be there so that you're prepared for a meeting or that you remember what's going to happen, you don't want people coming to the meeting asking, well, what was this? What was that? Direct them to the resources that you provided. So simply put, follow through is taking people. Simply put, if follow through is lacking, people won't take the meeting or you seriously. So just make sure you have that incorporated into your plan. So to recap, have you attended a meeting where you discussed a lot and accomplished very little? Why do you think that happened? How did that relate to some of the ideas discussed here? If you've ever been at a meeting where you really didn't know what you were trying to accomplish or what your role was, I think we all have been at meetings like that. And how does that make you feel? And just keep that in mind when you're structuring your own meetings. Now, you can't always have everything clearly defined, but if you have some routines in place, that helps a lot. How have you seen a lack of follow through create wasted time? We've all been at those things where we feel like we'd really just like to get those moments of our life back. So how can we prevent that from happening? So again, my name is Daniel Ludvigson. I'm superintendent of Elgin New Leipzig Public School. If you have questions, feel free to contact me at daniel.ludvigson@k12.nd.us. And some of the big takeaways I hope you got was make sure that you collect information beforehand. It can help you decide what sort of meeting or decisions you're going to make. It can help you prepare, and it can help you make the meeting go faster. And as I said, when you get to the meeting, you want to make sure you know what kind of decisions you're making, because that will affect what sort of information you distribute and how you collect it. Having time frames and time limits can be very effective for making meetings seem like a good use of time and that you respect other people's time. Allowing floor time and giving job duties out is a great way to feel like you have something to contribute to the meeting, that it's not just somebody else's meeting that you're trying to suffer through for a while. And finally, creating clear expectations. If you clearly define why you're there, who's doing what actions you're going to take, and follow up to make sure that they're happening, it goes a long way to making you feel like it was a useful use of your time and that you're not just there to waste time or make somebody feel like they have accomplished checking off that we had a meeting, that there's actually some purpose to it. So I hope that you found this presentation helpful. I hope you have a very enjoyable day. And with that, take care have fun, stay healthy.